1099, in theory, uh, that type of worker basically is making their own schedule. Not necessarily always making their own schedule, but the dogs or the projects, if you want to call them that, are their own, and then basically they can set their own schedule. So a shop owner wouldn't be able to tell a 1099 person, I need you here on Monday to work from 10 till 5. The bottom line is the 1099 contractor has a project of a dog or these dogs, and as long as these dogs get done by a deadline that's agreed upon between the contractor and the person who's hired them, then the contract is considered completed.
This is Ryan Alvarez with Grooming Unleashed, and I wanted to let you guys know that I told you when I first started this podcast I was going to be diving deep into a lot of different areas of the industry, such as nutritionists and doctors, therapists, groomers that are competitive, judges, shop owners, I mean, as much as you can think of. So one of the things that I think is going to benefit you guys is having little mini tax questions as far as the, things that business owners and even individual groomers have. So I am introducing you to my brother, Steven Alvarez, who is a professional tax consultant. So without further ado, I introduce you to Steven Alvarez. Hey, you found us. This is Grooming Unleashed, where we learn and talk about the ins and outs of the pet grooming industry. From pro groomers and salon owners to show hosts and dog handlers, we'll jump into the stressful and crazy stories of the day-to-day operations of the crazy world of grooming. I'm your host, Ryan Alvarez. Our podcast is sponsored by Loyalty Pet Products. Loyalty Pet Products provides quality grooming tools and accessories at an affordable price. From shears to stripping knives to smocks and hammocks, Loyalty Pet Products has an essential tool to fit your expectation and style. Use code UNLEASHED to save 10% today. Loyalty Pet Products, uniquely designed, beautifully priced. Hey everybody, this is Ryan Alvarez with Grooming Unleashed. This is episode 10, and we are going to start tackling some pretty serious stuff in regards to business questions, and we're going to be talking about taxes. I know it's not a fun word, but everyone has to do it. And brought along my other talented brother. You've already heard Kevin Alvarez on marketing, and you've heard my wife Jazair on competing for the first time, and now you are going to be able to hear my other brother, Steven Alvarez, and basically he is a tax professional, and he's been doing it ever since college. And Steven, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay, hello everyone out there. My name is Steven Alvarez. I've been doing tax accounting first in the private sector with the New York Yankees. Starting in my senior year in college, I had my business degree in business administration and a minor in accounting, and I did that for 11 years. And then shortly after that, I started getting into the world that our father had been doing since the early 70s of public accounting, and got into practice with him roughly in the middle of the 2000s and have been doing that ever since. Like the public accounting a little bit more because it's not the same old thing. Everyone's got a different situation with their taxes or their businesses, so it makes it fun. And I also love helping out those small businesses and trying to take them to another level.
All right, good deal. So, and then you mentioned our dad, Jose, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago unexpectedly. So, uh, I know that that was one of the things that you were kind of unsure as to carry on the business at one point, and I know it was definitely stressful working with family, and we've all done it actually. So I'm glad that you're still doing it because you've been able to see my small business uh, grow as well with Loyalty Pet Products, but also with Jazaire's company and brand, you've seen that grow as well. So, what are some of the main questions that you hear from a small business starting out as far as taxes go? Like, what's the main question that you hear from somebody who's kind of starting out?
Well, first, don't sell yourself short. I'm still stressed working with family. That hasn't stopped every year.
I'm not your best I'm not your best client.
It happens again and again. But no, the one of the first things, especially if it's someone that's starting a business, is what type of business should I be? And everyone seems to think, oh, I should be an LLC. And usually, when I ask people that question, why, they say, well, I don't know. That's what I hear, LLC. And usually, there's nothing wrong with an LLC. It does give you protection at the state level, but it doesn't give you it doesn't change your tax uh, effects as far as the IRS is concerned. So an LLC is, while it's not a bad thing at all, it's sometimes we usually like to have someone take it another step further and become a different type of entity um, so that we can try to help keep more money in their pocket.
So you would be referring to a S corporation, like for example, that's what we are. We're an S corporation, and it was the same thing with me when I was talking to Dad back in 2014, and I was putting my business together with, Sunbiz in Florida, and I did the same thing. I was like, "Yeah, I want to do LLC," because that's what I had heard. And of course, you hear those two words, limited liability, and you think that's the best for me. But Dad's the one that suggested I do S corporation.
And an LLC can still be an S corporation. As I said, the S corporation is recognized by the IRS. The IRS doesn't recognize the LLC for tax purposes. That's why, again, I don't tell someone not to be an LLC, but I do say that we should take it a step further, become an S corporation, and it kind of helps us have a little bit more control on the tax part of your business, because that's the thing. You do have a business, whether you are actually opening up a full-fledged storefront business, or if you just happen to be a groomer or other small business that's working for someone independently as a contractor. In theory, you are a business, so we try to help treat you as a business.
Yeah, so our topic for this first one, and you and I discussed this, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a background just so you understand where this is kind of coming from. So there's a huge debate in the grooming forum and the grooming industry as far as W-2 versus 1099. And the reason it's a big debate is because unfortunately a lot of salon owners have slash do take advantage of groomers by trying to avoid taxes that they owe their employees. And what that means is, so the legal way, if a salon owner has an employee that they have a schedule for, is W-2. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It has to be a W-2 employee. The issue is, and this happened to my wife, and it was something that you caught on to. And of course, just like myself, we were new to the grooming industry when I met Jazaire, and she was getting paid as a 1099, but she was being told when to come in. So she had a schedule. She didn't have her own dogs. It was the shop's dogs, and she was getting paid as a 1099, which means that she had to pay
taxes out of her own pocket. So the big debate, and unfortunately, not everyone is educated on this because they don't have a brother who's a CPA, is that they just assume that 1099 is illegal, and that's not the case. So can you delve into that a little bit as to the difference between a W-2 and a 1099, and then we'll stop after that and kind of go into little different variations of the benefits of both.
Sure. Well, again, like you said, the first thing is um, a lot of the difference. The biggest difference is maybe the word that I, want to use is control. When you're working for someone as a W-2 employee, they basically control your schedule when you're supposed to work, within reason. Obviously, there's still some laws as far as how much you can be worked and all that. But I'm saying in theory, your schedule can be 8 to 5 or this many days or this many hours. And if you decide that you don't want to come in and work, well, then that employer has the choice to go ahead and say, you don't need to work here anymore, and you lose your job. A 1099, in theory, that type of worker basically is making their own schedule. Not necessarily always making their own schedule, but the dogs or the projects, if you want to call them that, are their own, and then basically they can set their own schedule. So a shop owner wouldn't be able to tell a 1099 person, I need you here on Monday to work from 10 till 5. The bottom line is the 1099 contractor has a project of a dog or these dogs, and as long as these dogs get done by a deadline that's agreed upon between the contractor and the person who's hired them, then the contract is considered completed. Whether the dog got groomed at 6 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or midnight. That's in theory the difference. One is that the 1099 contractor has more control of their schedule, whereas the W-2 employee is being controlled as far as when they need to work by the employer. Obviously, there's the payroll tax difference. The W-2 employee has payroll taxes taken out for them, Social Security and Medicare, and probably some withholding, whereas the 1099 contractor is basically responsible for their own Social Security and Medicare taxes, and basically are matching their own as the employer themselves. Most people don't realize that when they are a 1099 contractor, they in theory are in business and have a business. And that is where some people just don't realize that. And that's where we may decide it's in their best interest that we decide to make them an S corporation and actually a business per se, so that they can actually have a little bit more control of the taxes that are being paid in. By that, I mean an S corporation, for instance, if you're just a 1099 and a Schedule C and you make $30,000, you're going to be paying almost 15.3% just in self-employment taxes. Not to mention, you're also going to pay income tax on that. Whereas an S corporation, you wouldn't be paying on that same amount. You would not be paying the self-employment taxes. You would only be paying the income tax on it. Again, it starts to get a little bit more complicated where it's easier to kind of show things to people, but an S corp, a independent contractor or 1099 contractor can sometimes benefit more by being that than an employee can, because they're able to take deductions that the employee can't. For instance, the mileage going to the project or the job that they're performing per se, the bank, going to the bank, going to get supplies, buying your grooming supplies if needed. Buy the supplies themselves that you get are an expense. those things you will not be able to write off as a W-2 employee. So there is some give and take with both. And again, sometimes you're not in complete control of how you're being treated based on the owner of a shop, unless you're actually your own boss. And at that point, you can actually dictate how you want to handle things. Even for a small business, when I say small business, I'm saying a 1099 contractor. We still may decide that we want to do some payroll. We start getting into a little bit more detail there. It starts getting a little bit more complicated, but obviously some people, depending on kids they may have and other potential deductions, it might be more beneficial to actually have a little bit of payroll, even for their quote unquote business. That way they're actually getting some credits that the government offers because of what they're making. Again, that's something that's diving in a little bit more deeper, but from the outset, I mean, that's two of the biggest things. The difference is that control, being in control or being controlled per se.
So basically a 1099, if someone's a 1099 right now that is paying rent, and it depends on the state too, states differ. So like there's some states that don't allow, and I did more research before the podcast. So like there's some states that do not allow certain salons, whether it be a barber shop or even, a grooming salon, to rent out in different states. So for example, if it is a legal state where they can rent out, different booths, apparently the owner is not allowed to have that same profession, is what I'm understanding. So if you and I owned a grooming shop, we can't, and we're groomers, we can't rent out booth space to other groomers. We can rent out booth space to a different profession, which I'm not expecting you to know this, but that's just what I read. So the whole 1099 thing, also the reason that it's kind of gotten sour taste in a lot of people's mouths in the grooming industry is the fact that it's really hard for people to follow all the strict rules for the 1099 to actually be completely legal. So
right, it does. Every state varies. I mean, that is no. I mean, even just now in California, they've tried implementing a law that basically they're trying to go away from the contractors. So it's more kind of the Uber law. And what they're trying to do is making it where those Uber drivers and Lyft drivers are not 1099s, that they have to be W-2 employees. Well, what that's done in effect is it's created some other companies like newspapers or people that write articles from actually saying, we can't do your work anymore. We can't hire you for that $50 report or that $100 article because we can't afford the payroll taxes to pay you as an employee. So again, every state has got their different rules. I mean, in my mind, I'm still not sure how the difference between a grooming salon, a grooming shop, and a barber shop or a beauty salon that has their booths rented. I'm not sure I understand the difference there. I'm gonna have to look more into that. But in reality, if someone already did have a business set up for themselves and someone wanted to come in and work, as a contractor for someone, I'm not sure how they could not get away with that, because again, if you're just hiring an existing business to do work for you, as opposed to hiring an individual, it becomes a little, it becomes it could be a potential war between, a particular business owner and the state that they're in. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Again, if I want to hire a company to come in my business and do work for me, then I should be allowed to do that. The difference would be, though, if I decided to hire an individual first and then after a while say, okay, maybe you should become a business. So again, it does become tricky, and every state's going to be different. So you still have to investigate the rules for your states. But again, it gets to be a little touchy. I don't think that they worry about it too much. Again, on the smaller businesses, it's when things start getting a little bit bigger, or you start getting your larger stores that are, having 15, 20, 25 groomers working in their places. Those are the ones that are going to be attacked more for not paying people there as W-2s, as opposed to your smaller mom and pop pet groomer that's, maybe has one person or two people total working in their facility.
But let's go back to that mom and pop shop. If they are paying that one individual as a 1099 and that person's being told to come in certain hours and stuff like that, that individual that's listening to the podcast right now should most likely proceed with turning into an S corporation, correct?
The individual that is being contracted out, it would be in their best interest to, yes. And in theory, that shop owner is probably doing something they're not supposed to be doing.
Correct.
That because you are, like I said, I have a perfect example. I have a client that has a day spa, and all of her people are contractors. They're the ones that set their own schedules, and when they come in, they have booths. Now, granted, I told my client that these people are getting more benefits than they even realize, as far as not paying some of the credit card fees and getting supplies offered to them that they're not paying for. But she told me that their December wasn't that busy of a month. And I asked her why, and she said, well, because everyone took off. And I'm like, why would they not want to work on what potentially is one of your bigger tipped months? And she's like, because they didn't have to. They're contracted and they choose their own schedule.
Yeah.
And she's absolutely right. So in that regard, she's doing it right. Now, if she told someone to be in on a Saturday or a particular day and they don't show up, they don't come back, then she has no right to do that, because they are not employees. So it's either the people are employees or they're not. And in that respect, yes, as if I was seeing this from an outside perspective and seeing someone is working for a groomer and they're a 1099, my first thought for them is, let's create a business for you, because I want to make sure that I keep more money in your pocket.
Right.
And treat yourself as a business that if you end up moving on and going to another groomer or even starting on your own, you've already got that business set up. So even if you do go work for another groomer and they're also in the 1099 model, when you go to fill out that W-9 form, you're not putting your name down anymore. You're putting your business down. And then that makes it a lot easier going forward.
All right, let's shake up the industry here a little bit. I'm going to play devil's advocate, because obviously, the shop that we own, we do it the right way. We have W-2 employees. So we're going to keep going back to the mom and pop shop. So they have a 1099 employee, quote unquote, illegally, because they're putting that person on schedule. They tell their said 1099 employee, here's where you're coming in Saturday from 9 to 6. And that groomer says, I'm leaving town that Saturday. I'm going to a wedding. She gets fired, okay, because she doesn't come in and they don't agree with her not taking that day off. They're in some really legal heat right now, right? Because of that?
Yeah, they could, but yeah, first off, they wouldn't technically be firing them. They would really, the reality is you'd be, they would be fired, but not as an employee. They'd be fired as a contractor. Now the difference is, and again, this is where it does get touchy, is because in theory, projects, like if you want to treat each dog as a project that it's one and done and it's over, usually there's a particular time schedule, and you can't say, Oh, yeah, we just need to get this dog groomed by next week. Usually that's not the case. It's a shorter time frame for whatever reason, whether it's that's when the owner wants it completed. It needs to be done today. So in that respect, that contractor didn't fulfill their duties of completing the project on time. But yes, they could be, because they are technically not allowed to be given a schedule of a normal time of this is when you're coming in. It's here's a project, here's your deadline. And as long as it gets done before the deadline, then you should be okay as far as putting in those guidelines. Most shop owners don't do that, just because it's just expected that this dog is on the schedule for this day and this time, and then that means that the dog will be finished within a couple hours, and then that's it. So it's just an implied that we have a contract agreement for each of these dogs. Again, and that's the other thing. Most people are not going to go through that process of having a quote unquote contract for each project, each dog, every single time there's a new dog coming in. So it's just implied, okay, here are this many dogs, and you're going to be getting those dogs done today. Yes, the contractor would have a legal argument to go and raise an issue with whichever legal aspect they want to go after, whether it's employee practices or the state, as far as filing a grievance with the way that they were handling their business, which potentially could open the door for the state of Florida or the state of whatever state you're in coming in and doing a check to see if that person should have been 1099 or not. That could rack up multiple payroll taxes and penalties for the owner, which will add up when you count interest, penalties, and however long time, the time frame that this practice has been going on for. It could potentially also bring the IRS into it, because if the state determines that someone should have been treated as an employee, then the IRS will also say that that person should have been an employee, and payroll taxes should have been paid to that person, to the IRS as well. So it can become a potentially very, very expensive chance to take as far as a shop owner is concerned, if not handled properly.
Would you say if the IRS at that point, like, kind of gets tipped off to that and they do get involved, that there's a very good chance that the shop would be audited?
Well, yeah. Well, like I said, they may be asking some questions that if you do not have enough backup to prove that that person was a true contractor, then the IRS has every right to make their own determination that this was not a contractor, it was an employee. And if they're saying it was an employee, that so much that you should have been paying so much money per quarter, per time frame for this individual, and we're, depending on the time frame that this person worked with them, we're talking it could be, a couple years. That's a lot of penalties that have added up, and interest.
So what do you
over
do?
The last couple years.
What do you do if an employee, and again, we've got really intelligent listeners, and there's a lot of intelligent people in the grooming industry. There's just uneducated people in terms of like taxes and things like that. What do you say?
Well, I was gonna say, the things that no one likes to do. So, yeah. And again, telling everyone that's listening out there, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. Sometimes, like I said, I'm not going to try and groom a dog because I don't know anything about it. And sometimes it's like that commercial, stay in your lane, do what you know, and let someone else handle the other things. But yeah, we're here to help educate a little bit, just on the cusp enough that you know a little bit more than you did yesterday. But it's not their job to know everything about how taxes are dealt with. So that's why we're trying to help with that.
Well, I was going to say, though, what do you do with an employee that is being treated as a 1099, and maybe the shop owner listens to this podcast and they're like, oh crap, we have to switch everybody over to a W-2 because I'm just not feeling good about this 1099 business. And the employee says, I don't want to switch over to W-2. What do you do in that regard?
I would definitely say, if that was the case, that they put something in writing first off. The very next thing that would need to be done is that 1099 individual becomes a business, so that now it's as an S corporation and even a C corporation, which I do not suggest for a small business, but as an S corporation, shop owner would not technically be liable to give a 1099 per se, because to an S corporation, you don't normally have to do that. Doesn't mean I wouldn't say to still not do it. I would still say to do it just in case, but you'd be doing it to an S corporation or to a business as opposed to an individual. And that will kind of put a little bit of a little bit of a distance between the gray area of a 1099 contractor and an employee.
And then to wrap this up, because like I said, we're going to do a series of tax questions and try to keep it brief. But would you say that if someone's listening right now that is running a business that has 1099 employees or contractors, and they're listening to this and they're not 100% sure if they're doing it the legal way, that their best interest would be to switch over their employees to W-2?
I believe it would be. It would be the best case for them to do that. And again, being early enough as it is right now, as we're speaking, being in January, it's as good a time as any to do that. I know that people may listen to this at other times, but yes, the earlier the better, just to kind of put a stop to the old tactics and going forward, treating it properly. Again, sometimes people do things to save nickels and dimes, and what ends up potentially happening is it's costing them thousands of dollars, and in the long run it ends up not being worth it. So it's always better to be on the safe side.
Right. All right, awesome. So our next topic that we're going to get into when you're available is going to be how to properly set aside taxes for your W-2 employees. And then some other topics in the near future would be, what are considered tax write-offs in terms of going to seminars and, grooming trade shows and things like that. So just stay tuned. And Steven, I want to thank you for your time. I know it's going to get busy here in the next few months for you, but where can groomers reach out to you if they would like to know more, or if there's business owners that would like to consult with you?
Well, you can always reach out to us at alvarezcpa.com, www.alvarezcpa.com. And then there's a contact us on the upper right. You can go ahead and fill that out. You can send it to salvarez@alvarezcpa.com, or you can always email us at alvarez, ALVAREZ, @alvarezcpa.com. And then we can go ahead and try to figure out something from there.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thank you. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And thank you so much for your time. And for all of you guys that are listening, I hope this was helpful and informative. And Steven, and until we talk again.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
We appreciate all of you out there who are following and enjoying the podcast. If you could leave a glowing review for Grooming Unleashed, it would mean a lot to us, as well as sharing with your grooming friends, coworkers, bosses, and anyone else in the industry. It would mean a lot. It also would mean a lot if you would visit our sponsor, Loyalty Pet Products,
at www.loyaltypetproducts.com. And don't forget, you can use the code UNLEASHED to save 10% off of your next order. Thank you very much for our sponsorship, Loyalty Pet Products, and thank you to all of you guys who are listening to us at Grooming Unleashed. We appreciate you and your support. Thank you very much for listening to Grooming Unleashed, and if you guys could share this with your grooming friends, it would be much appreciated. Please click on the subscribe button below, as well as if you hit the little bell, it will notify you when we have a new episode for you. Have a